What do you do when your soccer club closes? USL is coming to the home of the Packers, and we explore the possible calendar change in Major League Soccer. That and more here on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. You found your way to Morning Kickaround, where we dot the map of the American soccer landscape here on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays morning, and on demand on the Morning Kickaround YouTube channel. My name is Robert Kerr, local soccer guy. He's Jason Davis, radio soccer guy, and together we are Morning Kickaround. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, members. Thank you, subscribers, and thank you, Jason, for being here this morning. How you feeling?
Oh, thank you, Rob, for thanking me for being here this morning. You're welcome for me being here this morning. I could be doing many other things. I could be off preparing for a vacation that I got coming up. I don't know. I don't know what else you could be doing. No, there's nothing I would rather do than be here with you and with our viewers and with our MK Ultras talking about American soccer. And today is going to be a fascinating program. Very excited to dive into the stories. There's some growth stuff. There's some dot the map right on the women's side. We're going to dot the map today and a potential dotting of the map in the men's game as well. Plus that question that you teased, the big calendar switch for Major League Soccer. Friend of the show, Jeremiah O'Shan's going to help us dive into that. I know you're going to tell people more about that conversation, but I'm excited.
Yeah, we have a lot of good interviews in the can already. And then we got two on the show today. We're going to talk about some guys from Michigan who took it into their own power when they had multiple teams shut down in their town. So we'll get to that at 10 o'clock. We're going to talk the Major League Soccer near the end of the show and the calendar change. But we've got plenty of headlines, newsy stuff, even in the void that is the international break. But before we get to that, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, do so now. Become a subscriber. Help us climb towards the 6,000 mark. We crashed through 5,000 last week. And then let's get to that 6,000 mark before we can blink. Let's do it. And if you want to step up your support, become an MK Ultra. We are closing in on 100 Ultras. And that would be an amazing benchmark to get to. And I think that what should we set a goal for 5 new members or 5 and a combination of members and thanks through the show today?
Yeah, we could do that. Become an MK Ultra or throw us a little bit of thanks via the chat. And yeah, we'll do some bonus stuff. We'll make some extra stuff for you. We'll engage with your big questions about American soccer, about the future of our sport here in these United States.
And it's great to see we got some members in the chat already this morning on the live show. Bar Down Bully, good morning, sir. Soccer Zombie, hey, amazing video. Check that out. The goal reaction in Tulsa. He was front row there. So great to see some fellow creators supporting and getting in the mix. And if you are a member, one of the major perks is getting priority commenting on the screen. But enough of that. Do all those things, but let's get into it. Our long balls here on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. Let's go. It's official here on Long Ball number 1 to start the day. NWSL's 17th franchise will be in Atlanta. A record $165 million entrance fee, a big jump from Denver's early in the year. The Atlanta mayor, Andre Dickens, credited ownership, saying that they are making Atlanta the epicenter of soccer in this country. What do you think about that, Mr. Davis?
Well, I mean, look, Atlanta United, massively successful Major League Soccer franchise. Obviously, a little bit of a dark moment in terms of their on the field quality, but you know, the ambition is obviously there. They've already got an MLS Cup. They've been known to fill up that joint. One of my favorite American soccer experiences was covering Atlanta United when they made that MLS Cup field final. Rather, I got a chance to be on the field in front of 70,000 at Mercedes-Benz, talking to Don Garber. One of those situations where the sound is vibrating your body in a way that feels very strange. So that look, they can bring the heat in Atlanta. They've got the U.S. soccer headquarters now in Atlanta. Oh, look, by the way, all of this is down to the largesse of one Arthur Blank. I mean, it is basically all down to the fact that Arthur Blank is all in on soccer. He's kind of our modern day Lamar Hunt, if you want to equate him to somebody who was big into soccer in the past and help us get to this point. And now here's the investment into the women's game. Here it comes NWSL. So we've got Atlanta United, which has their own incredible world-class training facility and play in a world-class venue at Mercedes-Benz. We've got U.S. Soccer's headquarters there in Atlanta now. And they're going to build a world-class training facility for the NWSL team as part of their commitment and play in Mercedes-Benz. That part is interesting to me, Rob, right? Because I do think that we are sort of conditioned here in American soccer to box ourselves in when it comes to the number of fans we put in our stadiums for soccer. We go, well, an MLS stadium should be about 20,000 because you're going to get bigger than that. You might not sell the place out, right? You want a big, you want a big crowd, but you want to sell out more than you want 30,000 in a 70,000 seat venue. So what is this going to look like? Can the NWSL team in Atlanta, I imagine that initially there will be incredible excitement and they'll have a big push for tickets and people will want to go. It's always about carrying that over into the future and keeping it going and keeping that enthusiasm alive so that you can have big crowds. It would be great to see an NWSL team be able to get 30, 40,000 people in a building every single time they play. That would be great. I do think there probably will be people, though, who look at this and go, well, they really should be playing in either a smaller venue or their own venue, right? Shouldn't the goal be, like we see in Kansas City, for these NWSL teams to be truly independent when it comes to how they operate? We kind of got into this a little bit when we talked about the identity of clubs around professional soccer in this country, right? Chelsea women versus Chelsea men. Here in the United States, we don't do any of that. Obviously, those teams don't have the same history, but there's also an argument, right? But that you say you could argue that if you name a team or have a team under the same umbrella, like an Arsenal fan or a West Ham fan, for example, is never going to support Chelsea women. But here in the United States, you really don't have that issue where these teams are connected in identity. So you can be a fan of these teams individually and not being worried about, well, I'm also supporting my rival in the other version of the game.
Yeah, that definitely complicates allegiances. And I haven't quite come to like a resting position as far as whether that's right or wrong on, sharing identities or not. But that is a good point that like a West Ham fan is not going to support the Chelsea or the Arsenal women.
A fan of West Ham, the men's soccer team, the men's football club, is not going to support the Chelsea women's team, right? So but
if that other team was just an independent London women's soccer team, then that wouldn't be the case.
Which is, obviously, that's not really part and parcel of our conversation here, but I just think it's interesting because, again, what will the identity of this team be? And if you are, let's say you're a Charlotte FC fan just up the road in North Carolina, and there's no women's team in Charlotte. There is a women's team down the road in Raleigh, but there's no women's team in Charlotte. Are you going to attach yourself potentially to the Atlanta women's team? Can you feel good about that if you're a Charlotte FC MLS fan, when the identity may be very different? I expect that that's going to be the case in Atlanta, but the ownership is going to be the same. There's going to be a connection there. I don't know. That's fascinating. Riverside Grove with an interesting question as well off of this. Is the benevolent billionaire model sustainable? Are there enough of those billionaires that are into women's soccer? Yeah, I mean, look, this has to be a sustainable business, or it has to be at least something that people will want to continue to invest in. Maybe not billionaires necessarily, but, keep it going in a way that means we don't have to worry about the bottom falling out of all of this. So, yeah.
So it is interesting part of this of like the inflation of maybe that's the extra 55 million from what Denver, maybe that's the benevolent billionaire tax or something on him, or it's hard to like, how could 6 to 9 months or whatever that was at the beginning of the year when Denver announced, like, how could it jump that much? I know that a lot of these numbers are speculative and they seem like they're plucked from the air, but to go from 110 to 165 in a matter of months is notable, to say the
Well, I
least.
mean, yeah, I mean, I would think that a lot of that has to do with the value proposition that is the NWSL for these investors, right? That's obviously what it is, right? Like, oh, we think the league is even stronger and going in a better direction. Look at these things we have accomplished in terms of corporate sponsorship or broadcasting deals and those kind of things. I don't know. It does feel like a massive jump that is tough to rationalize, tough to explain. But if that's the cost of getting in, I mean, I can imagine that maybe, and I think we saw this with Charlotte in MLS actually. This is a very wealthy individual who's very interested in bringing a women's team to Atlanta, jumping the line. That's possibly what's going on here as well. I mean, I don't know what the other candidates were. We've talked about how Cleveland got left out when they went to Denver. Maybe Cleveland is who Arthur Blank is skipping over here. Hey, if you really want to get in ahead of these other markets, you got to pay a little bit extra. And he's like, sure, no problem. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, Atlanta, they're talking about epicenter of American soccer. Definitely lots of infrastructure going that way. Obviously, we get the Benz and the United States American a training facility going in. They're talking about a women's facility being built for this team. And a note here in the ESPN reporting of it saying that as part of the United States Soccer Federation's headquarters, apparently Blank donated $50 million towards that
Yeah,
Fed project.
that's why it's there. Yeah, of course. That's why, again, this is what I said. The largesse of Arthur Blank is driving a lot of this. It's driving these things. And I definitely think, I mean, it's interesting what Riverside Grove said about the benevolent billionaire, but that is the economic model of American soccer. Benevolent rich people, wealthy individuals throwing cash down ahead of any real return, right? And again, if you want to say that MLS, if you want to, every time you mention MLS, to use a dollar sign because you think they're completely driven by making money and they're not here for the benefit of the game whatsoever, fine. Again, that's your opinion and we can talk about it. But there is absolutely some truth to the fact that MLS and American soccer on the whole, and a lot of this happens in the wake of MLS's growth, doesn't happen if people aren't willing to take a risk on investing in American soccer. And I wish it was another way, right? I wish this was in terms of the top level of the game, right? The most visible and high profile version of the sport in America, whether that's MLS or NWSL. I wish it was driven by community clubs that were able to percolate up through the system and become their own thing and connect with their communities in these very deep ways and come to embody the civic spirit of the places they exist in. We have that. We don't have it in MLS. We don't have it in NWSL. It's just, it doesn't feel like that would have been possible without some people really kind of applying that boost by being willing to throw down millions initially. And now we're close to, we're into the billions in order to launch these clubs. We can't buy our history, but we can kind of jump the line of high profile soccer by having people willing to invest at this level.
It definitely seems like threading the needle of having that community that's bought in, but also having the benevolent billionaire on top of it
Right.
to marry the passion in the organic community
If it
and
doesn't matter
the
to you,
financial
if
trust.
it doesn't matter to you that there is a 25,000 seat soccer stadium in major city, name whatever major city you want. If it doesn't matter to you that MLS is spending millions upon millions on its players, obviously relative to big leagues in Europe, it's still not that much. But if none of that matters to you, if your connection to the game is much more at a more basic level, right? If your connection to the sport is about the sport and not about how much money is spent on it or how much the stadiums cost or whether these wealthy individuals are benefiting in other ways on the back of soccer, then, whatever. You can obviously be anti-MLS, and I understand that. But there are certainly something to be said for the fact that soccer is not where it is in this country without a big push by people who spent a lot of money to make it more visible, to make it matter more, even as we always are clamoring for more growth.
From the vibration of 70,000 screaming fans at the Benz at Atlanta, we go to the upper Midwest. What are the chances that a USL team comes to the home of the Green Bay Packers? Quite high, according to USL executive Justin Papadakis, CEO and chief real estate officer for the USL. He's a believer, at least on here, that USL can make a move in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Well, look, I mean, we go from that conversation about billionaires and benevolent billionaires and the money and everything else driving everything, as we have said, and look, again, we're all doing mental gymnastics. Every American soccer fan is doing mental gymnastics when it comes to these questions. What do we want? Can we be picky about how it happens? If I say that I want the map dotted, if I want to dot the map every time we do a show or every month or if I want there to be more clubs, because ultimately more clubs mean more soccer fans, and more soccer fans mean more opportunity for players, and the growth of the game is truly reflective of the depth of our culture when it comes to this sport, which I don't think we're doing yet. If I want to dot the map, then do I have to make peace with the fact that these are ultimately real estate plays? Because that's what's going on in a place like Green Bay. Again, Justin Papadakis, deputy CEO, chief real estate officer. Again, that's his title. Chief real estate officer says that Green Bay getting a USL team is quite high. The chances, rather, you need all of those land and market pieces to come together all at the same time. What we've seen, though, is that if we have a really engaged city partner, we can have the best shot at making that happen. And again, I beggars and choosers here, Rob. Like, do I want there to be a team in Green Bay? Absolutely. Can I be precious about how it happens if ultimately this isn't just about the soccer? If this isn't purely driven by the soccer, if this is also about people trying to make money or mixed use development and all that stuff. And this coincides with an article that dropped on the New York Times a couple days ago that talks about whether or not soccer stadiums can, quote unquote, revitalize American cities. They start talking about Pawtucket, which has built a soccer stadium, the most expensive lower division soccer stadium in the country, and then kind of plays out how all of these other towns and cities are talking about this. And I'm sorry if I have to play spoiler here, but the story says the data doesn't back up that these soccer stadiums actually do much for the local economy, right? Again, and as a conscientious person, as a citizen, of my particular locality, but certainly in sympathy with other localities, should I want, as a soccer fan, for people to build stadiums because it serves me as a soccer fan if it hurts that city ultimately at the end because they're handing out public dollars to private interests? I don't have a good answer to that, Rob. I don't know how to feel because I want to dot the map.
Yeah, the nightmare scenario is local taxpayers are out a bunch of money paying higher taxes and fees and land that they could use for maybe other things, depending on the situation, goes into something that's closed or it shifts to something else entirely from the original plan. You definitely don't want just like some white elephant, so to speak, of a stadium being paid for by the citizens. Back to Papadakis, it says for at least the next 10 months, USL will be looking at where to locate and how to pay for a 5,000 person stadium inside the Green Bay city limits. Listening sessions and World Cup watch parties will be held to get a flavor of what the residents would like to see on things from the stadium design to the team branding.
Yeah, this and again, Green Bay as a place. What my familiarity with Green Bay is completely based on the football team.
That's 99.9% of.
And again, the thing about Green Bay as an NFL town is that it is an outlier when compared to every other MLS city. NFL city rather. It is an outlier because Green Bay is not the major metropolitan area that supports all these other teams. Now, obviously, there's a culture thing that's happened there where Green Bay is clearly not just drawing fans from Green Bay. People are making the trip from Milwaukee a couple hours away or whatever. And I do think that it's interesting. Obviously, this is a 5,000 seat stadium. So they really won't have to draw from outside of Green Bay to fill it up, presumably if they can connect with the community and get people interested. But, in a world where we're talking about pro rel coming in for USL and we're talking about what this might look like, a place like Green Bay, fine place for a soccer team if they're interested. What is the long-term outlook for that team, or does it need to have one? Can it just kind of be a second or third division team? The story even says there's no clear idea of what league this team would play in, right? That's how early we are in this process.
Yeah, very early going there. Some cynicism, rightly, coming from some of the members saying these are all going to kind of come crashing down. They're calling the USL stadium projects maybe a possible house of cards. George asking, I wonder how much of an ownership stake USL has in each of these stadium projects. And I'm not
Well,
sure if that might be a case-to-case basis.
Look, I mean, I'm not an MBA, right? I don't have a firm grasp on the business stuff. I understand it like a lot of people do, which is for the USL, what is the value of this, right? More clubs. Why does the USL want more teams, Rob? I mean, do you have a sense of that? It's got to come down to franchise fees, expansion fees, first of all. We're talking millions, not hundreds of millions, but we're talking about millions to enter USL. It's a much lower level of entry than MLS is, right? And Green Bay would never be an MLS town. So what is their option? Their option is USL or MLS Next Pro. Again, there is this land war, land grab thing happening, which is part of why Riverside Grove is upset, because it seems like MLS is trying to monopolize American soccer by moving into the same kind of markets that USL is looking at. But I will point out that this is capitalism, right? And the base state of capitalism is that you always try to grow and try to push out your competitors and try to dominate. It's not just enough to kind of exist. And so USL is now making their play based on a rising interest in a lot of these places to build soccer stadiums if they can be packaged as part of mixed use developments, which would did in theory, again, go check the New York Times story if you want to see the data or a conversation about it. But then in theory, revitalize areas of these towns and cities that might need such a thing. So for the USL, and for the people that own USL and the people who have the biggest stake in the USL's value and who may be looking one day to sell USL, which has been posited as part of the plan here with promotion and relegation and first division soccer, there is the expansion fees and there are franchise fees, which you will pay every year to be a member of USL. Those are, as long as those teams are successful, and you can take two approaches if you're USL. You can say, we want a smaller group of really stable clubs that we know are going to be paying us every year. And that's going to not only fund the league office, that's going to provide value to the business, right? Because we're in the business of making money. That's why you have a business. There are people obviously involved in soccer whose goal isn't to make money, but in the case of USL, that is not the scenario. But you either have a smaller group of stable clubs that we're going to pay you every year, and you make sure they're stable, and we will be very conscious about this, or you just throw out as many clubs as you possibly can. And presumably, if even 75% of those clubs succeed and survive, you're making more money at the end of the day. You're growing at the end of the day.
So to end this story, we'll follow this as they go. There's 10 months. They're exploring the opportunities and how this would even happen. And Papadakis goes on to say, we want to do this right and not fast. So we'll follow that story as it goes in the land of cheese in Wisconsin. But moving on to another note, the World Cup 2026 is turning out to be an expensive proposition for all involved. And a news story from Henry Bushnell says that, even the parking is going to be an eye-popping number.
FIFA is selling parking spots near 2026 World Cup stadiums for between $75 and $175 per spot and per game day, more than the price of some actual match tickets at previous World Cups. Now, we've talked about the process of buying tickets. We've had Travel Football Fan on this show a couple of different times to discuss how this is going down. You had to pay to have the opportunity to be in the lottery to possibly buy tickets, if my understanding is correct. The multiple levels of this from FIFA's perspective is, I mean, it is so baldly exploitative.
Is ghastly a
Exploitative.
word?
That's what I meant to say. Exploitative. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's ghastly. Clearly it is. Right. It is avarice on a level that is stunning. Like it takes your breath away what they're doing here, especially when you compare it to previous World Cups. And, on one hand, you could say it's kind of our fault. Now, it's not your fault, Rob, and it's not my fault individually, and it's not the fans watching this right now. It's not their fault, but we live in a culture that has created a scenario where we kind of accept being squeezed for every single dollar we have when it comes to sports. Right? We
Yeah,
are just
yeah.
kind of fine with this. One way to think about this is how many times have you seen the story about the Super Bowl and about the price of Super Bowl tickets?
Yeah, it's like
Like,
one of the
whether it's
main one of the main stories leading into the game.
every single year, it's like, Super Bowl tickets are going for $565 for nosebleed seats.
And
You
that's
wanna
not
be
met
down.
with scorn. That's almost like
No.
praised.
It's a celebration of how popular this thing is, that those prices can be that high, right? And again, a function of capitalism, supply and demand. Everybody understands that part of how this works. And what FIFA is doing is what every other sports enterprise in America does for the most part. I mean, again, at the higher levels, when demand is high, when the level is supposed to be world class, it's, well, we can justify charging this because Americans are used to paying these prices, right? That hey, they're not gonna, no one's going to have a problem paying this because look at America. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true, and I do wonder about how the politics of the moment will impact how people interact with this, particularly as Johnny Infantino cozies up to the president of the United States. Yeah, I mean, this is it's I should say it's stunning, but it's not stunning. It is pretty much normal. I mean, everybody complains about parking prices when they go out to a stadium. Now, we also probably should do better with public transportation so people don't have to park, but that's our culture as well.
Yeah, part of the culture that parking has such a weighted importance in just infrastructure and logistics on everything. If you want to plan any sort of a project, if you want to have any kind of a business, parking is so weighty in that conversation, and that's a bit of a drag, but it is what it is. And it's wild that for many people, they're starting to consider going to games in Mexico because there is some price capping there, especially on the tickets. That it is just an outrageous moment that, for someone in Michigan, it would be cheaper to fly to Mexico City to enjoy the World Cup than to go to one of the domestic the game situations. But what do we take from this? I mean, it's just, do we mortgage our houses? Do we just skip it? I mean, like, where does this leave us as far as like normal people with normal
Look,
jobs trying to go to World Cup games?
I don't know. I don't know. And I struggle with this, right? I actually don't yet know what my role is going to be next year. So this is not me trying to be coy with this. There has been discussions about a potential thing happening around SiriusXM FC, which of course is my main job, right? I'm here talking American soccer in the morning with you 3 days a week, but I'm the radio 5 days a week working with Eric Winalda and talking about world football. And there's a chance that I will have an opportunity to cover that tournament in person, which is why I'm not in a position to have to think, am I going to pay for tickets? But partly, like, if I knew what my schedule was and I was working some games, I would then be able to say, well, would I pay for this game or would I go to that game? But since I don't even know what my schedule is, I'm not in a position to engage with this because I don't want to buy tickets and then find out I can't go. I don't want to try to deal with the secondary market. I don't want to do anything. And of course, just as a normal person, and not a wealthy individual, as somebody who's got a mortgage and kids, and I'm paying for college for my 17-year-old coming up soon, and we're saving for retirement like everybody else. How can I go to my wife, who is not a passionate soccer fan, and say, you know what, we need to spend $1,000 so I can go to this soccer game? I don't know how to I don't know how to have that conversation with her, as important as it would be to me. I don't know. So I will not blame anybody who completely passes on this tournament, which is the biggest crime of all, right? It's the biggest travesty in all of this, that the World Cup is coming back to America. The thing that is supposed to form new soccer fans and create an opportunity for this game to explode in this country is inaccessible to so many people. They can't even engage with the idea of going to a World Cup game. It costs so much.
I'm exactly in that same boat. So, I mean, we're going to have to get creative with this show. And I would like to hear from members, whether it be in the Discord or on the channel page itself. You know, what would you like to see from World Cup coverage from Morning Kickaround? I mean, because it is a gargantuan undertaking, only just because it's the biggest tournament of its kind, just the amount of teams to cover, the amount of games there is, the amount of cities scattered across the United States. And, you know, being at the game and like doing the whole old fashioned journalist thing might be a bit of a long shot for us, just because the amount of press that's going to be in there. And I mean, would be like a, you know, college game day sort of a show. Maybe we go to some bars or outside of venues, a la what we did in Albuquerque. Maybe we can be the, you know, an alternative pre-game, post-game. Like,
Yeah.
I'd love to
Look,
hear your ideas on how we should cover it.
And I look, I think this is coping a little bit, right? Okay, as a soccer fan, I'm going to admit this is coping. But as the chat is saying, a lot more fun is going to be had for some people at the watch parties, outside the stadiums, doing those kind of things. Or you could imagine, like, would it be great to be in the building? Of course. But if the price point is too high and you wouldn't feel comfortable even if you were in the building because of the amount of money you spent on it, then yes, absolutely, the watch party is going to be the move. And you and I have talked to people working in lower division American soccer who are going to be trying to maximize that. Right. They're going to have games in their towns, but what they're going to be doing is saying, hey, come be with us, come connect with our club and watch the World Cup. And you won't be paying thousands of dollars to do it. You'll be connecting directly with the most important thing in your little soccer world here, which is your local club.
As we're going along here in the show, we have half of the episode still to go. Got a couple of great guests lined up as we're going. Hit subscribe and then become a member at MK Ultra $3.99 a month. You get priority commenting on screen, early access to videos, bonus content, and access to the Morning Kickaround Discord server. We're our goal for the day is 5 new members and or super thanks. And there's a thanks button right under the screen if you'd like to help support this independent
we're capitalists. Show. We're capitalists here on Morning Kickaround.
Yeah, don't you hate those guys that are always asking for money to, you know, do soccer stuff? But anyway,
I mean, what are you gonna do, right? What are you gonna do? We got to pay people. We got to keep the lights on. It's how it works.
That's so true, so true. And our first guest of the day is waiting in the wings. So I'm gonna have a sip of coffee, bring them on in, and we're gonna talk about what to do when your club shuts down. That and more coming up on Morning Kickaround. Welcome on in here to Morning Kickaround. It happens every year, seemingly. A team across the United States shuts down, leaving fans and the community with a bit of a loss, obviously. And we just had one closed down just this week. So with this in mind, I brought on a special guest, Josh Pugh. He is the vice president of Lansing Common, and I'll let him tell the story of what they did up in Lansing, Michigan, when not only did a popular amateur team get replaced by a pro team that then went away after just a season. So, Josh, welcome into Morning Kickaround. Sorry to bring up bad memories, but we're going to get to the good part, I swear.
Morning, fellas. How you guys doing this morning?
Doing very well, Josh. Thank you for joining us. This has been Rob set this up. Rob invited you on. I'm glad he did. This is kind of dovetailing with some other stuff. I was just mentioning, you know, I work on the radio. I do SiriusXM FC, and just yesterday I got a chance to talk to one of the founders of Edgewater Castle out of Chicago, and here you are, and it feels like we're talking about the same kinds of ideas
Yeah.
in American soccer.
And it's a great, it's funny that you bring that up. I'm actually an Edgewater member. We really try to do everything we can to support other clubs who are also doing things what we would say the right way, right? Like a really nonprofit, member driven. You talk about it just before I joined. You talk about asking people for money to support soccer and support the community. That's what we're all about. And so love those guys, love what they're doing over in Chicago. Maybe a little bit jealous of the population density and the area that they have. But no complaints about the love and support that we've gotten from the Lansing community since we launched a few years ago.
So going back to the beginning, about 10 years or so ago, Lansing United, popular NPSL team, had famous battles against Detroit City FC, Grand Rapids, and the like. Kind of take us from there,
Yep.
where that story leads you to the birth of Lansing Common.
Yeah, totally. So Lansing United was a very familiar sort of story at that level of American soccer, in that the games were really out in a field, surrounded by some apartments and homes and one bar within walking distance. But it was really it was special for those who were there. But if it was a new experience for you, you'd walk up and you'd be like, this is cute. But it wasn't, to paraphrase one of the owners in the Midwest Premier League. What we're trying to build is a place where people want to go on a date night, right? And we weren't thinking about that at the time, because we were just a bunch of hooligans in our 20s who were going to the games and having a great time and watching others build something special. I would say the supporters weren't married. It was still. Although it was real grassroots and real small, I would say, with the benefit of hindsight, what it lacked was the control of the membership, right? It was privately run. And the downside of that is when you get a millionaire from out of town who comes in and says, what I'd really like to do is take this professional. It's completely up to the ownership, right? The membership had no buy-in in that. And that's what happened. And so for many people in the community, it was a really... for everyone in the community, I would say, it was out of nowhere. For many people in the community, they didn't know that background with Lansing United. And so I would say two things about the founding of Ignite, which many of our...
the USL 1 team.
That's right. The first professional soccer team in the state of Michigan, was that feelings were mixed among Lansing supporters, the diehards. I would say there were some who dove in right away, were in on the ground floor and were part of that first press conference, lighting off the smoke bombs. And there were some people that said, this doesn't really feel right. They're kind of taking this grassroots energy and turn it into something it's not. And the owner said, if we get to this certain level of attendance in this baseball stadium where we're playing professional soccer, we're going to feel really good about that, and we're going to take it another year. And this is 2019. And by all accounts, and by our own two eyes, and by all the reports, we really blew that out of the water. It seems, from what we can see from where we stood in the stands, it seems like maybe some miscalculations were made about what it really cost to run a professional soccer team. And it was not a money-making venture in year one. Now, of course, at the end of a season in 2019, if he had just hung on a few more months, he would have been able to say, the COVID pandemic, who would have seen that coming? But they shuttered the doors the evening of that final playoff loss at the end of the season. And that came as even more of a shock to those of us in the community.
Yeah, Josh, this look, I think most American sports fans are just kind of conditioned to want their local teams to be the biggest it can possibly be, to be the most, the most. It's just the way that we are kind of built as sports fans. And that kind of goes all the way back to how baseball was professionalized and then became these franchises, right? That's our model, and we are normalized to that. So what you guys are doing is kind of pushing back against something very deeply rooted culturally. Now, you said that, the soccer fans in Lansing may not have been on board with Lansing Ignite and going pro but even that is like kind of unusual. So how
Yeah.
does it? Do you think it's out
Well,
of soccer exceptionalism, or is there something else at work here?
yeah, let me say a little bit more about that. So the community really embraced the club, and by the community I mean the community at large. There were we didn't they didn't ever fill the baseball stadium with 11,000 fans, but there would be 2,500, 3,500 folks there on a weekend evening, and it was. However, that the base, that core of real diehards, were folks that never really, I would say, had 100% buy-in. We would come and we would sing the songs and we would do the chants and we would drink the beers. But at the end of the day, that's what created the conditions for Common to spark and grow. Is you had a little bit of, dare I say, resentment from those of us who were the diehards, who gathered at the brewery that had been our home base, and said that we want to do our own thing, and we want to make sure that we've got control of this, so that what happened over the course of the last year can never happen again, where somebody comes in and takes what we had away in service of creating something that they said was better. But the problem persisted where they just took it away again. And so that was where those conversations started about how do we create something that's universally positive. Maybe we don't have 5,000 people on night one, but we've got 100% buy-in across the board from those of us who really love the sport and love what it means for the community.
So part of this conversation stems from North Carolina FC, a USL championship team closing down, and almost as unceremoniously, you said at Lansing Ignite, it was just the next day after the playoff game,
Yeah.
just Dunzerino, and it was gone. North Carolina, they're in the middle of playoffs, same sort of thing. So things are probably pretty raw there. What is there any sort of commiserations or anything that you
Can
could
I
provide fans like
just
that?
jump in here, Rob? Since you're bringing up North Carolina FC, we do have a comment here. Mountains to Sea FC is trying to be the Phoenix Club for NWSL fans. We've been around for a few years,
Hey,
won a championship, operated by two NCFC supporters trying to grow in 2026. And they hit me up on Blue Sky as well. So we'll reach out. But yeah, that thing, Josh, that feeling, you certainly know it.
And what I love about that is just the names say it all, right? Like, North Carolina FC, sure, yeah, that's a generic sort of soccer team name. But these guys said, no, we want to be something more. We want to really reflect what this state means to folks, right? Like, I spent a little bit of time in North Carolina. You don't need to spend a lot of time in North Carolina to know to visualize like the Smoky Mountains and the Outer Banks and all the things that make that state so cool and so special to the people that visit, but also the people that live there. And so I love that they had that. And I'll talk a little bit about where Common came from. It didn't come from our brains, right? Like we said at the very beginning, we're going to do real engagement and town hall meetings with the soccer community around Lansing, and hear from them on what they want to see out of this club. And that reflected everything from what the game day environment should be like to what it should be called. And so, when we got that first group meeting together, and the branding at that time was a transitory. It was a bridge. It was all gray, and it was a stand-in logo, and we called it Quality Lansing Soccer Club. And there's some local shout outs in that, but that was never going to be the permanent thing, right? We said we were very intentional, and we said that night, maybe 3 people are going to show up, and then we just scratched this whole thing, and we packed the bar. We blew out Ozone's Brew House in Lansing, and that was when we said, okay, we got something special. We've got a real opportunity to catch this spark and to do these community meetings and to bring people in so that it really reflects the Lansing version of that mountains to sea branding that I really like that those guys
Speaking
have.
of your branding, we've had a request for this, which is the logo, the crest explainer, which I've skewered these things many times over my career. Give us a little thought on the origin of, first of all, your badge, your crest, why it fits, and then this thing.
Well, I've already sort of spoiled it, which is to say that a lot of this came from the conversations that we were having with the community. And I've said community like 14 times, and so I guess I'm on message today. But that's something that's so important to us. And as you see up there on the screen, common is one of the roots of the word community. And so we wanted to come up with something that was really unique and really special, even if it does reflect some of the things that are held in common among clubs in American soccer, which is like, we're going to be an FC, we're going to be a football club. That might not be super commonly understood to folks that are outside the soccer community. But really, we're gonna give a nod to some of that soccer history, while making sure that we really reflect what it is that makes this community great and what it is that makes it special. And so you can see that. But then the other thing that you can see as you read through this is the appropriately optimistic yet snarky tone that we try to take with all this is also very reflective of the authentic voice of our community and of our supporters.
Yeah, some of the funnier moments is the sash, and you were talking about this could be a place where you put some sort of credo or motto, but you're like, in reality, it just the bird needed something to stand on.
Which is a T-shirt that we made that became sort of the credo or motto in year one as we were doing the build up. And I talked a little bit about October 2019 was when Ignite folded. And so as we think about like, okay, what is it that makes that made this work, right? And I don't mean to make us sound like geniuses, right? Like we there was a not insignificant amount of luck involved in all of this, from the timing to the catching lightning in a bottle to some of the branding pieces that we pulled together. But one of the things that we decided early on was we were going to grow intentionally. And what I mean by that is we weren't going to grow too fast. And that was where we perceived that was maybe some part of the problem with Ignite, was that they bit off a little bit more than they could chew. And we wanted to be really thoughtful about the way that we grew and the way that we developed. And so one of our late 2019, early 2020 conversations, even after we embraced the branding and rolled that out for folks in the community, was do we want to take 2020 and think about how do we do this right? Or do we want to push from February, where we were standing, and hire a coach and bring in players and be ready to kick off in May? Well, the pandemic took care of that question for us. And that was a blessing in disguise, because we got a full year to think that through. Of course, we were able to get ready and roll out the ball in May 2021. We were still dealing with some restrictions for that very first game. We had to tape off seats and be really careful and thoughtful about capacity. And so we had a COVID sellout for our first game within the rules. And then by our second game, many of those rules had been lifted. And so we were still very careful about safety, but all of that came together to say, no, guys, take a beat, take a year, and think about how you really get this right.
So Josh, I mentioned talking to the guy behind Edgewater Castle, whose name escapes me right now. My apologies to him and his family. And one of the things I asked him was trying to figure out how you talked about, maybe Lansing and Knight bit off too much, and you want to be thoughtful about how you grow, but is growth always the goal? And
Right.
How do you sort of think about what the future of this club looks like, and maintaining the identity of Lansing Common without losing the original idea? Because they're going to USL League 2, which is a step up for them, still amateur soccer, but it's a commitment for them. And I imagine you guys have wrestled with these same things.
Sure. Well, for us, the real inhibiting factor in American soccer is how damn far away everything is in this country. And as soon as you start talking about flights and hotels, you've blown your budget out of the water. You're not talking about incremental growth anymore. That is exponential growth. And in USL2, the great thing about that is you don't deal with any of that unless you've had a phenomenal season. You're not flying anywhere until you get to a point where you are having a lot of success in the playoffs and doing things that are going to draw in that level of attention and that level of excitement that's going to allow you to sell it out and to start making real money. That it's at least is going to sort of defray some of those expenses. And so that's for us, like, we love where we're at in the Midwest Premier League, because the fellas that help run that league, and of course Steve Beckman, LCFC secretary and founding board member, is the president of the Midwest Premier League. So we're deeply involved in that. But they share that ethos of really careful and intentional growth. And that's the limiting factor for us, right? Like, we're very fortunate that we've got a metro of 4 million people in Detroit that's driving distance to the east. And we've got a metro of another million people in Grand Rapids that's an hour drive to the west. And so we are also very fortunate that the metro area of Lansing, which is home to 500,000 people, we've really got that to ourselves right now. All right, there's a USL2 club that's in Lansing that has not really been able to get a ton of traction, and not really gone about things the way that we do. And so that has allowed us to really own the soccer conversation in the community, while being thoughtful about how we grow within the bounds that make sense. A couple of years ago, we had a trip to Milwaukee as part of the NISA Independent Cup. And that was really tough on the guys because that's a long bus ride past Chicago, around Lake Michigan, to get there and then play a soccer game, and then a long overnight bus ride. So the sun's coming up when you're getting back to Lansing. That's about the outer bounds of where we would want to be. And in fact, that Milwaukee, Chicago conduit is where you see a lot of that Midwest Premier League growth happening in Chicagoland as well.
Yeah, Midwest Premier League, one of my favorite organizations that I've been able to contribute, or at least observe closer than others. And in Lansing Common, what a great story. Not only do they have one of the best badge explainers, but one of the best lower league soccer documentaries, The Common Game. Kyle Clayton did a great job documenting your 2022 season, and it really tells the story of your origins to a greater depth if viewers want to see that. But here in the here and now, you're in the summer soccer season, long break in between seasons. So what kind of things are you cooking up before 2026?
Oh, man. Well, as always, as we get closer to the holidays, we are going to be asking people for money. But one of the things that we do with that money and with that stature that we have in the community, we bring people in with the soccer. And then when we get them hooked on the soccer, we beat them over the head with the positive social justice message. And so we really try to use the privilege that we have through this game. We are lucky enough that we get to spend our free time organizing a soccer team in the summer. Like, how fun is that? How crazy is that? And so we take a lot of that funding that we raise and we use it to do good in this community. And so a lot of folks in our community and around the country right now are really struggling, need a little bit of extra help when it comes to putting food on the table. And so we have our early bird fund, which is through a partnership with a local coffee shop, has allowed us to raise money outside our normal operational expenses and give that to other nonprofits who are solely focused on their mission. They're not busy running a soccer team on the side. They're just doing the mission. And so for the final quarter of the year, the Greater Lansing Food Bank has received some support from us, and we're organizing supporters to go over there and volunteer as well. It's a real need in the community and, of course, around the country right now. And then we're gearing up for our season. For those who watch the Kyle Clayton documentary, you're going to get a real flavor of the story of every one of Lansing Common seasons. We consistently across our history have been the class of the league. We have scored more points than anybody in Michigan in the Midwest Premier League since our founding. That has never translated to finishing at the top of the table. We are always right there in second or third. And so whether that means tripping up at the beginning of the year and then making a furious run only to come up short at the end, we always make it exciting for our fans. Sometimes we run away, we look like we're running away with it, and then can't quite get across the finish line at the very end. And so that's going to be the story, is this the year that we finally put it all together and lift a trophy at the end of the year, and not just one of the fun rivalry trophies we've got with one of our in-state friendly rivals, but the trophy, the division of the conference. And so really excited about the team, really excited about Coach Brent Sword coming back. He's retired from his full-time gig, and so this is it right now. But looking forward to the season, as always, looking forward to a fun season of soccer in Lansing.
This next question might cause us to run a little long, but just to wrap it up on the point of where North Carolina is and whatnot. So those saying that, like, the summer soccer is much shorter on a much smaller scale, but it's yours compared to, people that were supporting a second division professional team. Would you say that personal ownership on a smaller scale is more or less rewarding than that that big professional scale, do you think?
Well, I mean, conceding my bias on that point, I think it's incredibly rewarding. We don't have to, when we worry about balancing our budget, we're not worried about paying ourselves out of that. We're an all volunteer board, and we're really driven by our members. We're worried about how much impact are we going to make in our community, and then what's the long-term sort of investment strategy and timeline, and what's that growth look like based on what we got in the bank and what we're able to do year after year. And so one of our early goals was to make sure that if something crazy happened, like a global pandemic, and we for some reason had to play a season without raising any revenue at all, which I don't know how that would work, but just a best practice benchmark for us. We want to be sure that we've got the budget paid for. We got all operating covered on day one, or even a little bit before day one, and we've been able to meet that year after year. And so that level of sustainability is a lot easier to do when you're not worried about paying yourself or what profitability looks like. For us, profitability is about the impact that we're able to have in the community, from the Greater Lansing Food Bank to partnering with folks that are providing housing or providing resources to those who need a little bit of extra assistance. And so there's a ton of groups in this community. We are very fortunate to have a lot of nonprofits who, again, aren't running a soccer team on the side, but are just focused on what they do best. And so we've partnered with a lot of those folks, and being able to worry about that as opposed to profit and loss has been really fruitful for us.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Josh. Josh Pugh, Vice President of Lansing Common. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your club with us on
Thank you, guys.
Morning
Cheers.
Kickaround.
Thank you,
so much.
Josh. Yeah.
Thank you to Wesley Henderson, who donated a super sticker during that conversation. Thank you so much. We're working towards 5 new memberships or stickers somewhere along the way during this show.
Look, the banner is up. It says members only stream after the show. What we're going to do here is we're going to get into this conversation about Major League Soccer's calendar maybe flipping over and what that would mean. And you're going to have some questions. Just know that if you become a member, you'll get access to the entire conversation with Jeremiah Oshan from Sounder to Heart as a member. We're going to give you a taste of that right now. And then after the fact, we can do a little bit members only, just kind of a brief Q&A, a little debrief on that, because I think there will be some questions. So if you want access to that, or you want to hear the whole conversation, you want to be involved in that, become a member right now. Join up, become an Ultra, get access to the Discord as well, Rob.
All right. Without further ado, we're going to move into that final segment of the day. Today's hot topic, the MLS calendar change with Sounder at Heart, Joshua Oshin. Let's get that rolling here on Morning Kickaround. Welcome on into Morning Kickaround. One of the big changes being circulated in American soccer is a possible change for MLS to go to the Euro calendar. And Don Garber earlier in the year kind of teased that they were still considering this in Major League Soccer. And our guest now, Jeremiah Oshan from Sounder at Heart, spurred a little bit of conversation regarding something that he heard, saying that this is back in the cards and there's some bigger discussion happening this week on this very topic.
Jeremiah, I'm showing the post you put on Blue Sky. So what you say here that we've probably heard about the Board of Governors meeting. If you're a super nerd, you have. If you're not,
yeah, I guess I kind of assumed a lot of like baseline knowledge that's pretty insidery stuff. But go ahead.
Yeah, right. And then it says your understanding is that there's no way it happens in 2026, which of course is a World Cup year, and kind of makes sense for a reset, but also is a heavy lift because of the timeline. But there's a very real possibility it could happen in 2027. That seems this. Okay, I'll go back to the word that Don Garber used in July when he talked about this. Seismic, right? This could be seismic for Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I mean, in almost a literal sense, in the way that it sort of shifts the ground underneath which MLS is on, right? Like and I do think that's one of the things that has maybe been lost in this discussion a little bit, is this is much more of a shift than it is a formal change. Like they're almost flipping the schedule around to be opposite of what it is, meaning that instead of the season ending in winter, it's going to sort of start in winter, right? It would start in spring. And I mean, that's my point, is that a lot of the games are going to be happening at the same time that they're happening now. It's just the end of the season is going to be in spring, summer, and the beginning of the season will be, or like a big chunk of the season will be during winter.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, so off of this post that we've already shown, you had a long discussion, many different people in your mentions over this. Some pro,
I think all from Minnesota.
And some con. Yeah, there was some.
Why would Minnesota be opposed to this kind of change?
That's right. At one point,
right?
They do basically have hamster tubes to move around in the wintertime because it's so damn cold. So I mean, they're conditioned to think, how could you possibly play soccer? I saw at one point, I think Wes Burdine sent you a map, like literally sent you a map of like average temperatures in certain parts of the year.
For sure.
Yeah, and so look, I think the initial reaction is kind of understandable. Oh my God, they're going to play through the winter. How could they do that? But the devil is in the details, and I guess that's the thing. Is so much of this is still speculation in terms of how MLS actually executes this plan.
Yeah, and I think that's stuff that's still TBD, but I think one thing we can assume, like, okay, this is one of the things that I think I've gotten hung up on, and I have sort of debated with people, is that people talk about how, okay, well, like one person told me we can't play soccer in Minnesota from Thanksgiving until the end of February. And I said, well, I have bad news for you. We do play soccer between those times now, because MLS Cup, I know you like, and I'm not trying to be pithy here, but the reality is that MLS Cup is in December and Champions League starts in early February. That's not, that's the reality. So if you are in those tournaments, you don't get to get out of them.
Yeah, I guess what Minnesota United fans are saying is if they finish first over, if they win the Supporter Shield and they have home field advantage, when we get to MLS Cup, they'll be like, no, it's too cold here. Let's go play somewhere else. They'll happily give up home field advantage, right? Right.
Exactly. Well, like, I think one of the funny things is that this week is it's nice that this happened. So the Canadian Premier League played the championship game in a snowstorm, like an almost unplayable snowstorm. And people keep pointing to this going like, and this is what you want to play through? And I said, we are playing our MLS playoffs right now. Do you want the playoffs to be in this kind of weather, or do you want the middle of the season to be played in this kind of weather? Because this is the reality, is that North America is an enormous continent. And whether we're playing in this, there's going to be bad weather no matter what schedule we pick. Unless we go back to like the OG MLS schedule. Well, actually, we would play in the summer still. But you go back to the OG MLS schedule where there was only like 6-month long season, you might be able to avoid some of this. But we're playing 10 months a year no matter what.
So to take a step back, the proposition on the table that's being discussed is change it to European calendar, starting in late August and then ending in late spring, rather than starting at the very beginning of spring and running to the beginning of the winter. So we're hearing a lot of cons about wintry, cold climates and team markets. What are the plus sides? Why does Major League Soccer, why are they entertaining this, and why now?
Okay, so I think there's a few things here, and then these things get sort of glossed over that are real benefits. Now, whether they counteract them, I'm not necessarily giving a subjective opinion on, but the main benefits are that the transfer windows line up. And so the idea is that we will be able to get better play. So one of the things that lots of CSOs are asserting right now is that they are missing out on, the second or third best player on good teams because their team isn't willing to let them go in the middle of their season. Whereas if our off season was lining up with their off season, it would be a lot easier to let these players go because they could replace them more readily. Right? So this is a money problem. This is a thing where if MLS is willing to spend the money to bring in these types of players, they can get them in this new calendar. That's the thinking. So you're going to raise the level of talent that is coming into MLS. It's going to raise the profile of the league, all these things. Then there's a secondary part of that, which is it makes it easier to sell players if your windows are lining up. So all of a sudden, like let's take the Sounders. They're trying to sell Obed Vargas. Well, they don't really want to sell Obed Vargas in the summer, which is when everyone wants to buy him. They would much rather sell them in the winter. What the winter market is going to be, diminished, and it's going to be tougher to sell them in the winter. But it makes sense for the Sounders, right? But so that streamlines the transfer incoming and outgoing elements. The idea being that there's going to be more money coming in, and it's going to be easier to spend money going out. Okay, so that's one part of it. Then the other part of it is the actual calendar. So instead of playing our most important games in the worst weather parts of the year, meaning November, December, we're going to move our best game, where they're also, by the way, competing with the NFL, where they're competing with college football, where they're kind of competing with baseball at the early part of the playoffs as well. So you have all this competition with the biggest sports in the country at our most important part of the season, which is November, December. So what if we flip that? What if the most important parts of our season were being played in April and May, where we're not competing with football at all, where we're now competing with the NBA, the NHL, and obviously there's still competition. There's no way to get out of some competition, but you're not competing with the behemoths of, like I said, the NFL, college football.
Well, look, yeah, the obviously the thing you have to kind of get to, and for some people it takes a little bit longer to get there, but the thing you have to get to is Major League Soccer is competing with those things no matter what.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter when the calendar is happening, and again, I mean, I've seen the argument in your mentions. Why would you want to go up against the NFL during the regular season? Well, why would you want to go up against them during your playoffs? Like
right.
Like which one is for you more important? I think that, that idea that we're going to have a dip in attendance because there will be games that are played in relatively cold, certainly colder weather than they're played now during the regular season. But again, one of the other things about the weather here is, while you're always going to have heat in certain parts of the country, Jeremiah, there's obviously an issue with 100-degree weather happening across the country during the summer when Major League Soccer is playing the bulk of its games. And you end up with also, how many games were delayed for thunderstorms?
That is another very good point. Are we going to have I guess the question that they are going to be asking is, are we going to have more games delayed for snow than we would have, that we're already getting delayed for thunderstorms and lightning storms, and how many, and how much of a problem is the heat in places like Texas? And it's easy to say, well, we have 10, let's call it 10 teams in northern markets who can't play in the winter. Well, how much longer are we going to go before we have 10 teams in southern markets that can't play in the summer? I mean, that's a reality.
Obviously, one of the responses to that would be, well, it's much easier to it's not easy to play in heat, though, but in terms of the facilities you have, in terms of sort of how you maybe you have facilities that are sort of made to play soccer in the summer, and maybe there's cooling elements and those kind of things. What about winterizing essentially some of these places where even not even the cold weather northern climates, but some of the other ones that may have some winter weather issues? Like, if you don't have heated pitches, are you going to be delayed because pitches are frozen? I think there are questions around that.
There absolutely are questions about that. And those are things that MLS owners are going to have to decide that they need to invest in, right? Like, if we're going to be playing more games in the winter, more teams are going to have to invest in underground heating. That's a reality. More teams are going to have to find indoor training facilities. That's a reality. Now, these are the trade-offs that presumably the MLS owners are going to be debating and discussing and having to figure out. But these are all things I think, and from my perspective, are solvable problems. There is nothing impossible about winterizing the league. Now, there are probably 6 weeks in the season that are going to be impossible to play through. And I suspect that we will have a lengthy winter break that accommodates things. And if they don't, then we're crazy and we shouldn't be doing it.
I hope this isn't a curveball, but the third alternative to a calendar change is what they do in places like Mexico. They play in the spring and in the fall, kind of splitting or avoiding the harsh winters and harsh summers. So, excuse me, but my question is, does that kind of calendar interfere with that player exchange? Does that put them off timing to have players incoming and outcoming?
Apertura Clausura. Does it affect?
Well, they have
does that affect incoming outgoings?
Well,
the
because
same?
I don't think it creates a hindrance, because both seasons, they're complete seasons that they play. So it's not like they're playing two halves of 1 year. They're playing two distinct seasons that
Yeah.
have a distinct champion. So there's nothing that stops MLS from going to that. And I suppose that might be one of the considerations. I have not heard as many discussions about an Apertura Clausura kind of arrangement, but you're right. That is a perfectly viable way of sort of skinning the cat a different way.
I think so. A lot of this reaction that we're seeing, and is it representative of the entire fan base? I mean, that's really difficult to know. I mean, I'm sure MLS has done, in fact, surveys are out, and we've had people
Right.
that are ultras, that are members, tell us that, hey, I've been asked about this. This seems like it's coming because I've seen it in the survey materials that Major League Soccer has sent out to its fans. But I think a lot of the reaction is just based on this not weird, but the innate American vibe of Major League Soccer, and then our American sensibilities about what sports is supposed to look like. And it's not so much about when the league is happening, although weather and all that is on the table. But it's just, again, like if you said, let's split the season Apertura Clausura, we don't have a history of doing that. Minor League Baseball has done that, but people don't think of minor league baseball as serious enough competition to care too much about the format. So if you do something like that, it is going to be a shock to the system. But then again, so would a protracted break in the middle of the season, Jeremiah. So, I mean, your thoughts on the idea of like taking a month and a half or 2 months, perhaps even off, to get out of the way of some of that winter weather. What does that do to the quote unquote momentum of a season?
Well, I think my theory is that they're going to, I think one interesting way of doing it would be to sort of do, so, we're getting at a point now where we can't play a good round robin, right? And so I think that there's ways that you could probably do a split schedule where you have sort of like a upper tier and a lower tier, where you play for the first half of the season to be in one half of the league, and the second half of the season is in another half of the league, and you sort of rotate who you're playing. Like, there's creative ways to sort of balance that so that there feels like there's a real distinction between the first half and the second half of the season. I also suspect that there's going to have to be some sort of tournament that gets played during that. We could see like an MLS's back style tournament that gets played between the two halves of the season, maybe in a warm weather place where, all the team, where you can put, maybe that's what Leagues Cup becomes, where it's like a single location type of thing. I don't, these are things that I'm speculating about, and I've read speculate. I don't think I'm creating any of this from my own creativity.
It's not just a Jeremiah O'Shan production. This is
right.
There's
Exactly.
kind of
like this is like bits and pieces of things that I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay. So one thing that is not speculation, one thing that has been said again by Garber going back 3 months, but as this comes back around with the end of season Board of Governors meeting, is he said that they're looking at completely overhauling roster rules, overhauling the way they think about rosters. Now, there is wow, that's really interesting. I've been waiting for something like that for a long time. That seems to me like it's connected. It's part and parcel of the calendar switch. If they're going to do one, the other one probably comes along with it in some way.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, is that the biggest mistake MLS could make is thinking that they can make this change without overhauling the way that they do business. Because if they go into this thinking like, well, we can just sell players for more money and that'll take care of itself, that's crazy. Like, the only reason to do this is that because MLS right now, depending on how you want to debate it, is somewhere between the 10th and 20th best league in the world, right? That doesn't really move the needle for the average American fan in terms of quality. Like, the league is better now than it was 5 years ago. I think most people would agree. But to really break through, I think, to the American consciousness, and this isn't just to the casual, this is not to like the casual NFL fan, but this is to the fan that is otherwise supporting that's watching Champions League at 11 a.m. on Wednesday every week, or 8 a.m. on, what I mean? And it's like, to get their attention, you got to be pushing for, like, we can make a credible argument that we're better than France, that we're better than Italy, that we're better than some of these other, like, we're not, I'm not saying that MLS is going to get to be Champions League quality. They probably aren't going to be EPL quality or even Bundesliga quality, but why can't it aspire to be a top 5-6 league in the world? And the way to get there is by making big investments in talent. And the way to get that talent is just like, this is a step in that direction, right?
Yeah, something else I want to relate from the reporting in July is, I believe it was from The Athletic. I want to properly credit this, but somebody did a straw poll, which of course is just basically testing the waters, and their reporting was 27 of 30 MLS owners were on board with the calendar switch. I mean, if that's true, it's going to happen. I mean, Don Garber is simply the voice of the collective will of the owners at that point. And to relate it to something else seismic that might be happening in American soccer, we weren't sure that there was really any heat to the idea of pro rel in USL until it became clear that the owners were backing it. If 27 of 30 owners in Major League Soccer are saying, yes, we want to change this calendar, that seems to indicate what you're talking about, that they see this as necessary to continue to grow to the level of their ambition.
Right. I think that's sort of the thing. Like, I was, one of the things that people were throwing around was like, well, I hope Minnesota sues if they do this. Well, I would assume Minnesota is going to be on board with, like, I think that part of the process here, and part of why it hasn't happened quicker, is because it's taken a lot to get virtually everyone on board, because that's kind of what they need. They can't have 4 or 5 owners saying this is the worst thing we could have done. You're killing our team. Because
right.
That's sort of undermining the whole project. And so my assumption is that if it's not literally 30 of 30 owners, that it's something, like you said, like 27 of the owners who want to make this happen. And that's going to include a lot of these northern market teams, the team, presumably a team like Colorado, a team like Real Salt Lake, teams like Chicago, go down the list. And I would think that the only way it happens is if they are assured that this is going to benefit them ultimately in the long.
Welcome back here live. Welcome on into morning. Here we go. Our live format changes here, but if you want to see the remainder of that interview with Sounder at Heart Jeremiah O'Shan, become a member. That full interview will be available to Morning Kickaround members, the MK Ultras, pretty much immediately.
Yeah, put up a poll while that was running there, and yeah, there's a lot more in our conversation with Jeremiah. That was, and we even kind of branched out from just the calendar discussion at one point. So if you want some extra stuff, make sure you become an Ultra so you can get access to the entire interview. But I put up a poll while that was running, Rob. Should MLS switch its calendar? 90%, only 21 votes. 90% of people watching us right now say yes, MLS should switch its calendar.
Yeah, so 90% should switch the calendar. So that's an interesting initial take. And it's funny that the calendar changed. Like, you go back to about 10 years ago, and all the roadblocks that we thought American soccer had, the pro relegation, the training compensation, the calendar. But to me, because Major League Soccer is kind of like become way more part of the international player market than they were 10 years ago, it's night and day. It really seemed like there was a big gap, and the players that came had to be a special set of circumstances or something, and definitely seemed like that gap, the calendar, was more of a roadblock than it does now. So that kind of dropped down my priority list. But it's interesting that that's now become their option, or the lever to pull to try to get more eyeballs.
Let's do this. Let's wrap up the live show for everybody watching who's not a member, and go into a members only stream, because I do think there's some stuff to pick at there. But as you can see on the screen, dot the map, become a subscriber first and foremost. Like the video if you're watching this after the fact, and obviously if you become a member, you get access to the rest of the Jeremiah O'Shan interview, you get access to the members only stream that we're about to do, and Discord and everything else. So Rob, I think that's a good plan, right? Let's go into a members only stream for a couple minutes here and kind of debrief on what we talked about there, because there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, thank you. Before we get out of here, thank you, Wesley Henderson, for the super sticker. Much appreciate the support there. And then, just like Jason said, we are going to go to member only. So if you're not quite there yet, we will be back for a great new action-packed Friday episode. So until then, everybody, enjoy your soccer. All right, welcome back in, MK Ultras.
3 seconds until the live stream goes. Rob, you didn't ask me how long it was going to take to convert over, so this is like that was not handled very well. I don't know why you sent us out when we still have 25 seconds before it's going to convert over to the
Hey, you know, this is a new league for us. We're just getting our feet at this new level. We're doing the public to the private thing. You know, I need to get promoted to get familiar with this level.
All right,
And,
well,
you know, there's a
7
countdown here.
seconds now. So 5 seconds until we go into the members only stream. So join.
Yes, do that. Become an MK Ultra. We'll see you on the other
Now
side here.
we